Welcome back everyone, and thanks for joining me again. And we're concluding this chapter on the mise en place, talking about the vegetable cut or the usefulness of the French vegetable cuts for home cooking. So I'd like to put this into perspective. Now there are basically 7 vegetable cuts, and we're gonna go through them quickly and to see exactly how they can be used. So I'd like to divide the vegetable cuts in 2 categories. For me, there is the slice cut. There's 4 of them on one side, and then on the other side we've got 3 other cuts, which are the diced cuts. So let's start with the first one, that's part of the slice cut, and that's going to be using basically the chef's knife, or a small éminceur as we call it, which is the small size chef's knife. And that's the chiffonade we're going to be talking about. Chiffonade is simply the action of taking leaves like that, of salad, of anything here, is spinach, and you're going to just roll it like this, like a cigarillo. You've seen this, I'm sure, before. And you're going to do this action of slicing, and it's a rough chop. So rolling motion, and basically you're gonna get this here, and that is a chiffonade. It's a kind of a rough chop that you can use as a topping. A lot of time you will see this with vegetables, but the thing is that you can actually use that for other things. For instance, ham. Okay, the person at the deli didn't do a good job, so I've got this untidy piece of ham. So what I can do is just kind of tidying up together. It doesn't have to be a real bowl. And then you can again do the same thing. The slicing, the rough slicing that I will be using as a topping on top of a salad, on top of pastas and things like that. That is also a chiffonade. Moving on to the next vegetable cut, which is the julienne, that uses the slicing method. And for this, I'm using this piece of leek here to show you. You see these little lines. This is exactly the kind of how thin stripes you need to cut with your knife. Usually to do this as well, you need to have, it's easy to have a vegetable like this that is already in a leaf kind of state, like a piece of cabbage, a piece of leek like this. For the movement, same thing, it's very simple. And you hold your vegetable here, and you need to try to cut as thinly as you can. It has to be basically the thinnest of the thinnest in order to get something decent. Okay, so just as an example, that would be a julienne of leeks. Now you can use this as a bed or garnish, to put a piece of fish on top. You can cook it in butter or blanch it or anything like that, and you can do the same with, for instance, citrus like lemon and oranges. And I think for home, these are the kind of the use I have. It's just to use this easy to manage vegetables, because there is a trend now to use julienne in things like apples and radishes and everything like that. But for that, you actually need another tool. Let me show you what that is. Now, if you want to make julienne in large quantities, as you've seen in restaurants, don't think that cooks nowadays use their knife. This is a lie, actually. What they use is this. This is the new tool I've already used, is the mandolin. You got different style, and as you can see, it's got a straight blade. You can take a carrot and make slices, but you can also attach these types of blades that are the julienne blades, and they transform this carrot here that you will pass like this, and will come out on the other side with this kind of shape. So it will be an automatic julienne. I would not recommend the use of a mandolin when you start, but I put a link in the video description if you're interested. And now moving on to our third cut, which is the paysan cut. So still with the chef's knife, and you can use a carrot. It's a very simple but actually quite useful cut. So you'll start by planing your knife, cutting a carrot in half, for instance. And again, when you're here, you're going to cut it again in half. It's very simple. Then you got this kind of shape at the end that can resemble a fan if you were to trim this off. The paysan cut is used for soups. They're basically very thin slices of a carrot. You can be cut in 2 like this if it's a small one, and 3 if it's a large one. And you just basically, like the julienne, you're going to slice rather thinly, and just a few millimeters thick with your knife, and you're just gonna go and keep on slicing like this. It doesn't have to be super precise, but the goal of the exercise is to try to have a thin garnish that is easy to cook and that you can use with potatoes, carrots, turnips into soups. As you can see, you get this kind of little typical fan or triangle shape. This is called the paysanne. And now for the fourth cut, which is the most important, especially from home cooking, this is the one you're going to be using over and over because this is the base for a lot of sauces, but for all stocks, cooking stocks. And the mirepoix is a rough chop of vegetables. So for carrots, for instance, you can even use unpeeled vegetables like a carrot for stock, or it can be peeled. It's a very simple chop. So for instance here, you're gonna have all your carrots like that. It doesn't matter which one you take, and they're really like chunks. So rather large, the rolling motion, and it doesn't matter what they look like. They're meant to be diced, but this is the rough chop of a mirepoix. And the mirepoix is also something else. In the kitchen jargon, when you say, please make me a mirepoix, it refers to the base vegetables for a stock, which is carrot and onions. That is called a mirepoix. In some other kitchen, people tend to add celery as well, but it's not always the case. So you can hear the term mirepoix for that mix of carrot, onion, plus eventually celery, or you can hear the term mirepoix for this, just the rough chop for any vegetables. We can now move on to our second part, which is the diced cut. So all what we've seen before, all these cuts, that include the chiffonade, the julienne, the paysanne, and the mirepoix can be done with a slicing motion and using a chef's knife. Now for the diced cut, it's much more crafty. You have to craft things, and the knife of choice for me and a lot of people, actually, it's not anymore the chef's knife, but it's this, my dear old filleting knife. And you'll see why, because it's got a very thin blade, very, very thin. For the type of work we need to do, it is very useful. So the first cut that you're going to see is the jardinière. It's called in English the bâton or bâtonnet, which is those little kind of little sticks. And you need to transform a chunk about 4 to 5 centimeters in size of a carrot, for instance, and transform this. So the first thing you need to do, because this is round, you need to have some kind of a squarish shape. So you're going to have to use your knife, and you see it generates a lot of offcuts. When you have that flat base, then you can kind of continue and go around the carrot and try to give it its kind of squarish shape. So all the offcuts are usually used for stocks and other preparation and soups and things like that. So you see what you get? Something squarish. This is the beginning. And when you're here, basically, it is just a matter of slicing rather thick, just half a centimeter or so. And you have to be crafty with that knife, you see, to get these first slices. And this is what you're going to get, you see? And that's the beginning of you crafting these little batons. You see the type of work? So you turn around, and then from here, again, then you can start to have, very carefully when you start, and that's why I use this knife, and you have this kind of what we call the bâtonnet cut. This is the jardinière cut. Our second cut is called the Macedoine. Now the good thing with this dice cut is that it all starts from a little batons like this, and then from here you're going to do dices. The Macedoine cut is basically the same bâtonnet, the same size that you've done before, like you start with the first cut, and you simply then go forward and you're going to make cubes. A medium size. We're not going to talk about millimeters or anything like this. And this is then a Macedoine. So just we go from bâtonnet to dices. And that can be actually used in a specific salad called the Macedoine salad. I'll give a link in the video description if you want to train on doing that. To finish, our last cut is the brunoise, which is basically exactly the same exercise as we've done with the bâtonnet and the cubes, except that they have to be way, way smaller. This is used as a little top-up garnish. So again, using that kind of knife is really good, and you have to start with the same way, except that everything you do, it's going to be smaller. So smaller slices first. Once you've got your slice, as you can see, they're very thin. Same thing, the bâtonnet, they're going to have to be smaller again. So everything is again about crafting, the art of crafting these things. Finally, for the brunoise. It's just a matter of gathering again the little sticks like that. And we're gonna use that tiny knife to again try to make these very, very small cubes. So ideally you want to have them flat like that, so you know what you're doing. And you're gonna make these very small cubes. And trust me, you don't want to make this in big quantities because it's difficult. But roughly speaking, this is what you get, the brunoise, which is the very, very little cubes. You can use it with all kinds of vegetables, with bell peppers, for instance, to give some colors, they're great. And you can sprinkle that on top of soups or to decorate a plate. And if you look at the video that's on screen at the moment, you'll see what I've done with one of those things. But that's it, guys. That completes all of the cuts. So let's recap. And here they are, all the vegetable cuts that we've covered. So let's recap. I've divided the chopping board here in two sections. So remember that side here, these are the cuts, what I call the sliced vegetable cuts. Using the chef's knife is best, in my opinion, starting with the chiffonade, which is good for toppings, followed by the julienne cuts, also good for topping or some garnish, like the leeks, for a bed of vegetables, to put something on top, like a piece of fish. Then you've got the paysanne, good for soups, the brunoise, the base of all stocks and sauces, this rough chop. And on that side, these three cuts, best to be done with a filleting knife or a very thin knife, maybe a Japanese type of knife, a santoku knife. You've got the bâtonnet or jardinière. Moving on to the Macedoine cut, this kind of cube. And the final one, the brunoise, which is also used as a sprinkly garnish in fine dining usually, that you can use. And that completes our series basically on the mise en place skills you need. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.